And then more recently, I joined an early stage startup and have started to embark on my portfolio career with growth and early stage companies. So I turn it over to you, Beth, to share your background.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Debra. Debra's background and mine have a lot in common. So I did start at Procter Gamble after business school at Michigan, and I was in the soap division for 7 years. So Joy and Dawn and Cheer and I don't know, Spick and Span and Cinch. Some of those brands no longer exist or not at Procter. And after 7 years, I really wanted a different global path. And so I went to a company called SC Johnson, probably familiar with it. It's a 5th generation family owned and operated company, about $12 billion, Southeast Wisconsin. And I had a career in marketing and then general management, mainly international. So I lived in China, I lived in Canada, and I had a lot of US based international roles. Absolutely loved it. But got to a point where there wasn't a whole lot more to do. And I knew I had probably another 8 to 10 years of working in a full-time job. And so I made an unexpected move. I went to Ecolab, which you may not know. It is a large, it's $13 billion B2B company, and it's in the industrial and institutional space. And I actually went as the CMO, which I was not looking to go back to marketing, love marketing, but I had been a general manager for a long time and I loved it. And so the CEO actually was a guy named Doug Baker, who came from Procter & Gamble. And the COO was a guy named Tom Handley, who came from Procter. So you might know either of them. And they were the two people who really recruited me and wanted me to come in and learn the business, but bring also the CPG experience and skill set and build the brand, build the team, the competencies, and learn the business. And so I ended up doing that. At the same time, I started a business in life sciences to support pharmaceutical manufacturing. I took on our healthcare business. And then when I left, I had been running a $2 billion portfolio of businesses in the healthcare and life sciences space. A year ago, I left. No, actually 6 months ago, I left. A year ago, I told them I wanted to leave in favor of a different portfolio, which we will be talking about. So that's me in a nutshell.
So Beth and I are both embarking on this new direction, and she's more advanced in the journey. So in terms of being transparent, we're both works in progress on these new journeys. We don't have all the answers, but we have some perspective to share for those looking to explore new directions. So Beth, I was really intrigued when about 7 months ago, I saw a LinkedIn post where you were declaring that you were ready for a new direction. And I actually sort of paraphrased some of what you said about my new direction will be a portfolio of roles that leverage my skills and experience. So one, I admired and took note that you were intentional in declaring this new direction. But what is a portfolio career? How do you define it?
So I think it's not one full-time job. It's really understanding, and I will talk through my process, but really understanding what you want to be fulfilled and to meet your objectives, and then realizing that that can come in multiple parts, and does for a lot of people. So when you're at this point in your career, there's a lot of people want to be on boards. Some people want to consult also. I wanted to be an executive coach, and I can give the background on that. But it's putting together and realizing that one particular job doesn't have to meet all your needs and may not be able to. And also providing yourself with more flexibility to pick and choose how much you work, with whom you work, et cetera.
So what I took away from you and my own journey is the red thread or common denominator is it's a portfolio of roles as opposed to one dedicated day job. But I think each of us could shape what's in our own portfolio. So I'm going to give an example of how I've been shaping mine and then turn it back to you to hear what's in yours and how to make the transition. So as I shape my portfolio career, I'm focused on what I describe as 3 buckets. Bucket 1 is consulting. And I just launched Bass Collective, which is my strategic marketing consulting, working largely with early and growth stage companies. My second bucket is advisory work. And then my third bucket is board roles, which I'm continuing to pursue. What's in your buckets, Beth?
So why don't I step back and tell people how I got there, and then I'll reveal the buckets. So I think my first piece of advice to people is, if you're thinking about this, you have to really do the work of saying, what do I want more of? What gives me energy? And what do I want less of? What's draining the life out of me, at least in my case. And so what I wanted more of was flexibility and ability to focus on business strategy and growth. That's the part of business I really like, whether it's organic growth or inorganic growth. And I knew I wanted that mental stimulation. The other piece was, I really enjoy people and team development. And that was always what my brand was, and that I was really good at that. And I found it the most fulfilling part of the job. On the flip side, what I wanted less of was winters in Minnesota. And that sounds like I'm making a joke, but it's true. It's like brutally, I don't know, for me, it just got to be too much. I didn't want to be in an office 5 days a week. We were coming out of the pandemic. And although we officially were hybrid, my company was very clear the senior executives needed to be in all the time. And I was tired of the day-to-day execution. You know, I had implemented all the SAP programs I ever wanted to. I was tired of the quarterly profit pressure to, you know, all the things a company does. And this is not about Ecolab. This is about any public company. You do a lot, right, to deliver those last few quarters of a sense. And I, you know, just the 24/7 nature of it, just never being off. And so going back to, I wanted more business strategy and growth, and I wanted more people and team development. My portfolio has 2 main buckets, which are board work. And I have been for 4 years on the Securian Financial Group board, which is a financial services company. It's $6 billion. And I've really enjoyed that work. And so I'm looking to do more board work. And then I got certified as an executive coach, and I'm helping people build their careers and actually work through transitions. So I bring today my own personal experience, which I'm very happy to share the ups and downs. And then also I'm actually working with a number of clients who have done transitions. I've worked with them on them or are starting transitions. So have a lot of experience helping other people with their transitions.
So I think there's a topic to unpack around how to arrive at what should be in your portfolio. And I love your self-assessment approach of what do I want more or less of, because that's a very simple tool to be honest with yourself about what you love and what you want to part with at this stage of life and career. But it's also a transition process to plan for, because it's a different reality around who should be in my network. Do I have the right sort of folks in my kitchen cabinet, so to speak, to help me get those next roles? Financially, am I ready to embark on a different journey? What are my obligations? Do I anticipate changes in income? And even new certifications or education that one would need to get. So one question for you as we unpack the topic, in addition to self-assessment, maybe hit on some of those other transitional elements that you thought about, and we could take them in turn, like networking. Did you have the right network for these new areas? How'd you think about it, and how'd you branch out?
Oh, so many questions, so many ways to go with that. So I'd say, first of all, I think people get stuck because they don't really think through. The other part of the honest assessment is, what are they going to miss or going to need to plan for? So the planning, the most obvious one is cash flow, right? And so it's likely, even if you can replace your income over time, there will be some sort of dip. And I would say, although I'm a very optimistic person in general, and I think Procter people are can-do type people, this is one where I would put on whatever the opposite of rose-colored glasses is, the gray tinted glasses, because you don't want to be creating a next chapter and have a lot of pressure about cash flow. And so plan for things to go much slower than you expect, to be out of your control. And then, you know, maybe you'll be pleasantly surprised, or maybe you will have planned appropriately. But I would say definitely the financial piece. The part about what are you going to miss, I have worked with a number of clients who it takes a while to get really honest with. They're sort of stuck and to figure out why. And it's because they don't know how other people will perceive it, or they've defined their own self-worth and status as related to their title, their position, whatever. So none of that's wrong, and none of that's, in my mind, superficial. It's just get really honest with what you might miss and think about how else you might be able to do it. And then in terms of the other sort of tactical pieces of the planning stage, so part of it's how much do you have to keep secret what you're devising, and how much can you be out in the open about it? So I advised my company I was leaving in December, but we didn't announce it until April. And so I had months of planning, but I had to be very careful about the networking. I was able to do some training though. And so I did an NACD certification. So I'm a board certified director. We can talk more about that if you like. I also did an 8-month coaching training program. So I was getting myself ready and over that time. The other thing I'd say is someone actually that you connected me to, Debra, said to me, the next season you get to choose the people you're on the journey with, which it just struck me, because if you think about anyone who's been in a corporate career, you don't get to choose many of the people you're on the journey with. You hopefully get to choose your team, but you don't get to choose your peers, your boss. And now you're in a position where you can. And so who are those people, and how do you start hanging out with them now? Are there organizations? Are there like, where do those people congregate? Maybe it's the P&G network, but who are the people that are going to be fulfilling to be around, who are going to be accretive, and how do you start doing that, even if you're not in a position to change, to actually launch that next chapter? And then go ahead.
No, I'll let you finish your thought. Go ahead.
Oh, so many. And then I wanted to go to networking because, first of all, I'm a strong introvert, and the word networking actually is kind of icky to me. And so what I learned about networking, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, Debra, because Debra's the ultimate networker. She is like the opposite of me. But for those of you who maybe cringe a little at the word networking, what I learned is I think almost everybody's doing it wrong, and I surely was. Okay, so it's not getting your resume into as many hands as possible. It is not meeting as many people as possible. It's about telling your story in a short, impactful way that's memorable. But then here's the key question that I didn't know, but I got from an advisor, which is, who in your network should I be connected to? And then you talk about that, and then you make the big ask, and you say, would you be willing to connect me? What you really want is that person to make an email connection or any kind of connection that then you can follow up and talk to that person. Okay. Someone told me, you don't even necessarily want to give them your resume or your bio, because it's an easy excuse. People will say, oh, thanks for this. This looks great. I'll keep it in mind. And if anything comes up, I'll refer to it. You've now given them the ability to be passive, right? If anything comes across their desk and they think of it, fine. People are well-intentioned, but busy, right? And so this question about who in your network should I be connected to, and would you be willing to make that connection, is critical. And I always end up also saying, what can I do for you? Is there anything I can do for you? So I'm sure all of you have people who are job seeking, who all of a sudden are just asking, and you find it kind of cringeworthy and like kind of want to at some point avoid contact. So I always try to see, and there often is something I can do for the person. They might have 90% of the connections, but I know someone that they don't, that they'd like to be connected to. So I always try to make it reciprocal, so they'll want to have that next conversation. Debra.
Yeah, so I'll share my perspective on networking, and Beth is right. I love it. I'm a connector by nature, so it's not a chore for me to network. It's fun, but I've learned to be more intentional in how I build connections. So for my portfolio career, a lot of what I want to focus on is helping early and growth stage companies. And that required building a new network and startups, because much of my network came from big companies and big agencies and big consulting firms. So my last role in a startup helped me power up that new network, which has been important for where I am now. The other concept that I subscribe to is pay it forward, pay it back. And I've spent a lot of time paying it forward, meeting with people that I was introduced to and asked to help. So-and-so wants to get into healthcare. Can you help them, Debra? So-and-so wants to get into marketing from finance. And then you never know, right, when it will be paid back. So someone that I gave mentoring advice to in my last role, a founder of a startup, just recommended me for a board role that I'm in a process for. I had no idea it would go that way, but I paid it forward, and surprisingly, she's paying it back in a nice way. So I think be intentional about your network and how you need to broaden it. Pay it forward, pay it back. You'll be surprised on how the balance works. I like your point also, Beth, about the ask. I think women are often shy about making the ask of, could you please do this for me? And that's really important, right? To get the follow-on you want. I'm going to ask you, Beth, to talk about some of the certifications and expanded education you embarked on to support this new direction.
Yes, and I'm just going to go back and build on your last point about making the big ask. One thing I wanted to add was, particularly for board roles, which probably a lot of people are thinking about, and we could talk a lot more about this, but one of the things I learned is you want to look for people who would have similar profiles to you. So as an example, because I, like Debra, have strong consumer goods background, marketing and general management, those are the people I really want to talk. Most board searches still go through recommendations, right? A lot of times recruiters are involved, but to do vetting, they're not really identifying the candidates. So it's still largely referral, as in Debra's case. And you really want to know the people who have a background like yours. And I was told to be on their Post-it. So when they get a call about a role and they either can't take it, they're not interested, there's a conflict of some sort, you want to be on their short list of people that they recommend. And as an example, I have a very good colleague who was a very successful CFO. Okay, but the calls that people make to her about a role, they're not going to want me, right? I can read a P&L and all of that, but I was never a CFO, and that's what they're looking for. So I'd say do the networking, and particularly think about people who have a profile similarly to yours, who already have board seats and will be getting those calls. And I think it's even better if they're already in the portfolio stage, because a lot of times recruiters know that if someone's fully employed and is on one board, they won't be able to take another board. And some of the large recruiting firms have told me that there's even an algorithm in their system which kind of kicks you out once you're full-time employed and on one board. Your name doesn't even come up. So you asked about certifications. For those who are looking at coaching, I'll be quick because that might not be as many. I did a coaching program, and then I passed that certification. And then the next step is to go to the International Coaching Federation, and you have to do an oral test and a written central site exam for 3 hours, and then you get certified. So I have done that. There's different levels of certification. It was very helpful to me during that time period when I was exiting my job, because I had that 7 months between, it was 4 months between when I knew and when we made it public, and then another 3 months of kind of transition. And that's a hard time because you're winding down, you get excluded from things, you find out who truly cared about your thoughts and who liked you for your title. I mean, it's a weird time.
Sorry to interrupt you. That was the biggest insight in leading a big company. It's leaving a big company. You find out who your real friends are. And I was
totally right. And
yeah.
And I characterize it as some people were huge disappointments, and clearly it was all transactional for them when you thought you had a real relationship. But other people came out of the woodwork and were like, I was in a meeting where you gave a presentation on such and such, and it made such a difference to me. So you get both of them, but it gives you great clarity on who are going to be great colleagues and advocates in your next chapter and who not so much. So, but it was great for me because at the same time I was ramping down my corporate career, I was ramping up the coaching. And so I was starting to really see my next chapter very clearly, knowing I really loved it. It was not theoretical. We were coaching people. I was coaching 20 clients. And so I was getting a lot of good experience, actually, and a lot of transition coaching and career coaching. So that was really fun. On the board world, I know people say, what should I do to prepare myself? And here's what I'm going to say. There are loads of programs out there. We may even have some material on that, but a number of organizations have, like a lot of universities have programs. I did do the Northwestern Coach Readiness Program several years ago. I know Harvard has one, Stanford has, lots of schools have them, and other organizations. What I would say on that is I'm not convinced they help you get on a board. They may help you with your confidence. There may be great networking opportunities, but in my experience, no recruiter or board member has said like, oh, and it's great you did that program. They really want you for your experience, your judgment, your whole career. And I'm not sure that makes a difference. So if you're thinking about doing it, and they're, I think, quite pricey a lot of times, just really think about what you're really wanting to get out of it, because I think it's more about your own confidence. And I think it's probably better for people who are deep experts. So if you're a deep cyber security expert, but maybe haven't had exposure to P&Ls and other things, then it might be broadening. But if you're someone who is in, as an example, general management, you've probably done a lot of the things that are on their agendas. You will definitely learn things, but it's not going to help you get a board seat, I don't believe. I did an NACD certification, so I'm a certified director. Recruiters and board members have told me that doesn't really matter in the recruiting process, which is fine, because I did it because I wanted to make sure I really understood governance. And so I did do that program. I enjoyed it. If what you want to do is really understand governance, I think it's good for that, really good for that, because governance is, of course, very different from being an operator. And it gets into a lot of ethical issues and how to handle situations. So I really did enjoy that. But those are the certifications that I did to get ready over the last year and a half.
So I'm going to just double click on each in turn. So would your recommendation to those considering coaching as part of their portfolio, would you recommend the certification to be more prepared, or?
I definitely would. So the way it works is you go to a certified program. I went to one called the Hudson Institute. I absolutely loved it. I learned so much. So I went into it saying, I already know how to coach. I've been coaching people for 30 years. Everyone in the brother says I'm a great coach. I know I'm a great coach, but this will make it official. Guess what? I learned a ton. What I was doing in my corporate life was a little bit more mentoring, which is also important. But we all know that's when, dear so-and-so, you would really benefit from sales experience. You should get exposure to this person. You're giving them the answers. Coaching is really about asking the right questions, and you're not giving answers. And you're really not supposed to be saying, well, grasshopper, when I was early in my career, here's what I did. That's something different. It can also be valuable, but it's very different. So there are a lot of executive coaches out there who kind of are doing more of the mentoring, but really haven't been trained in coaching. And I think there's a real benefit to doing that. Okay. And anyone who has interest, I would, message me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to continue that conversation with you personally.
Oh, that's great. And then Beth, what I heard you say about board certifications is it's less about helping you get on a board and more about helping you be prepared to fill the remit of a board director role.
Right. Right. And that's probably more for you. I don't know that, like, most boards will help you figure out if you are a deep expert in something. They'll sort of give you exposure to the other areas and help you get up to speed. So I don't think you need it, but it really is. If in my case, I really wanted to understand governance, and I think it was helping me look at my next chapter and look forward to it. Because I was thinking about this for a couple of years, but I, from a financial standpoint, knew I didn't want to go before 2022. So it also helped me kind of start to live in my head, live in that space, and make sure, I really liked it and that I would be good at it, and just let me look ahead during times that, remember, this was during COVID too, right? So healthcare and pharmaceutical during COVID, it was craziness. So this was a nice kind of distraction and view of the future for me.
Okay. Now, we had gotten a lot of questions before this webinar forwarded to us around getting on a board. So as we look at a portfolio career broadly and many different paths and buckets, there seems to be a lot of common interest in getting on a board, being prepared to serve on a board. You've shared some insights already in terms of networking and certifications. Is there more advice that you can impart to this audience around how to get on a board and how to be the best board director you could be?
Right. So as you said early on, you know, Deborah and I talked about this in advance, and I said, you know, I've been to 2 different webinars where people got up and said, like, the title was How I Got on 4 Boards in 6 Months. And it was just brutal because they were very unique circumstances, very little I could use, and just demoralizing. Right. So it is a long and slow process, much of which is out of your control. It's a very competitive process. If you do the math, for the Fortune 1000, there's probably fewer than 2,000 seats open a year and hundreds of thousands of people who want them. Having said that, I'm really optimistic about the process and what you have to do. So you have to really understand what value you bring and what kind of board you think you would add value to. Like you talked about, Deborah, what you think you could play the best. I would suggest professional help in doing your bio and resume. I used a company called Navigate Forward. They happen to be based in the Twin Cities, but I never once met them in person. They do everything virtually pretty much. And it was reasonable investment, and they helped with thinking through the market, my skill set, what the story is, the bio, and the resume. So I think it's always helpful to get third party if you can, because you know, we can probably market anything really well but ourselves. It's so much harder when it's you.
So hard. I agree with that.
So hard. And like the person I worked with was a very senior executive recruiter who had done a lot of board placements, a woman named Patty O'Leary, and she's phenomenal. And so, you know, I would say start with the right materials, the right raw materials, really important. And then put it out there in the world. So, you know, Debra mentioned social media posts, but I think you need to tell everyone you know, and hopefully everyone they know, what your intent is and what your short story is about where you think you can add the value. And, you know, most particularly recruiters, I would say, don't have a lot of time. So they kind of want the headline. You are what? I'm a marketer and general manager who's, you know, whatever your 2 to 3 sentences are, your elevator pitch, you have to get really good at and be able to tell people. And that would be a piece of advice I'd have is, so get professional help in the beginning, network, you know, think creatively about all the spaces of people who are on boards or who might know about boards, whether it's you're working on not-for-profit situations, you know, volunteer things. It can come from anywhere, and you hear so many crazy stories. I mean, it's the industry itself probably could use an overhaul, if you ask me, because you hear way too many stories about so-and-so sat next to so-and-so at a dinner, and, you know, then they got a board seat, and you think there's got to be a better way, but you just have to realize that it's a numbers game, and the more people who know your story and can think of you when they hear about a board spot, the better off you are. And so use your, you know, your school alumni association, use the Procter Association, use, you know, your kid's school that you're volunteering at. Everyone who is in the kind of realm of professional careers, they don't have to be on a board, but, you know, anyone who's a general counsel, anyone who's a CHRO, those types of groups. I sit on the Greater Twin Cities United Way Board, which is full of people who are CEOs and on boards and things. Nothing's come of it yet, but those are the people who need to know I'm looking. So don't be shy about putting it out there. Here's what I'm looking for, and here's where I think I add the value. It's just, that's the way most board positions seem to happen.
And Beth, what's your point of view about not-for-profit boards? Is it a stepping stone? Is it a learning experience? You're on the United Way. How should we think about not-for-profit boards in the mix?
It's a great question. I don't think this is all editorial, right? This is all just one person's point of view. In my experience, boards don't really care that much. However, the reason apart from all the philanthropic reasons you do it, the networking reason you do it, are they're the people who you want to be around and tell your story. I've not seen any board that says, well, I see, because I've done a lot of board work for not-for-profit. Oh, and you're on, this board and that board, and tell me about it. And what did you lead? I mean, never a single question. At most it's, oh, I see that you did that. But I don't think it's not going to be the thing that gets you the interview or gets you the position over somebody else. I do think it puts you in the room with the type of people often that you want to network with, and you never know when they have access to opportunities based on their day jobs and their networks.
Right. So this serendipity, right? It's sort of like be out there, but you never know who's going to advocate on your behalf. And I like your simple insight too about make your intention and agenda clear and have your short pitch socialized so people could represent it on your behalf, right?
And you just have to have it at the tip of your tongue, because you never know when you're going to meet that person, and make it natural. So I did work with a company that had this elevator pitch, and I said, like, help me do this elevator pitch. And I said, no human being talks like this. I can't even remember it. I'm not going to sit down and sound like this. This is ridiculous. So we really had to work through something that felt natural, authentic, and that I would feel comfortable saying to someone that I was seated next to at a lunch or at a not-for-profit board meeting or something. So I think getting yourself really comfortable with it, forget the buzzword soup, but just like, what is my message? What am I looking for? And how can I work that into conversation comfortably?
No, that's great. I have a few more questions I'm going to ask, and I'm seeing the Q&A start to build in the webinar. So we'll also be sure we leave time for that. So we talked a lot about what it is, how personal it is, how to define it, how to prepare for it, how to transition. So what are some of the ups and downs in going on this journey, pitfalls to anticipate, what surprised you? Maybe just talk about sort of the unexpected and ups and downs in this journey.
Everything has taken longer than I expected. I've had to follow up on a lot of things, because a lot of times it's a high priority for me and a much lower priority for the other people. So on coaching, I'm looking at affiliating with some organizations, and it just takes forever. And I feel like I have to constantly, how can I kind of say, hey, how are we doing on that? What's next? So that's been slower than expected, going along just fine. But, I think most of us probably, or all of us, were hard chargers. I mean, people who are recruited at Procter are used to, moving things quickly and fast and driving, right? And you can't always do that. And that could actually backfire. I will say, in the board world, you have to really give yourself. I mean, you have to understand it's going to be up and downs, and there's going to be a lot of disappointments. I mean, I think anyone who's being honest is going to tell you there were a lot of bites that never materialized. And so I would get, someone would call me about a board role, and I'd get excited, and I would research everything I could online. And some even I went to interviews on. And then it would be one of my observations, and Debra, you and I were talking about this prior to the call, is in executive roles, I think there's often much better alignment on what the criteria are. And on board roles, they tend to be, we could have this or that. I recently was talking to a recruiter about a role that was spec'd as, we want either a CEO or a president or a GC or a CHRO or something else. And I'm like, those are totally different backgrounds. I had an experience where I was very busy. I was in the middle of an acquisition. I flew, this was years before I was on Securian. I flew to Chicago. It was really painful to get away from work for a day. And I got there and they said, well, we wanted someone who was a CFO and or had deep poultry experience. Okay, that like I would be the last person that would fit that job. I couldn't believe it. Spent a day doing it because it was clearly going nowhere. So I would just say, really understand the criteria of the spec and sort of ask questions a little bit about it, and just calibrate your expectation, because there's going to be probably a lot of things out there. And, there was one that was looking really promising, and I was about to do an interview. And then the recruiter came back and said, oh, I finally got to talk to the chair of the NomGov committee. And they really think, given their challenges, they want a lot more governance experience, someone with 10, 15 years of experience, which I have 4. Okay. I would love the days back of my life that I spent analyzing everything online because I thought I was going for interviews. So my only advice is just understand that this is, if people aren't telling you this is the way it works, I'm telling you, it really is a lot. And Deborah, I think you have your own stories of, there's just a lot of ups and downs, a lot of things, I think you have to not give up. You have to be really clear on, this is what I want to make happen, and I am going to make it happen. And realize that there's going to be just a lot of times when it doesn't work out for reasons that are totally beyond your control, and that's okay. I try to treat every one of those experiences as, what did I learn from that? Aha, how does that make me smarter, better in the process? Did I dodge bullet? So that's what I try to do.
And I concur with a lot of what you're saying. The first one is be patient, which is not my strong suit. And I don't think P&G folks are wired to be patient, right? We're rewarded to be impatient and to be drivers and to be
sense of urgency. Remember that criteria?
Yes. Like I remember Alex Housen, you'll laugh, Beth, if you remember that name, but day one on the job, the advice I got was be a pest. I don't know if anyone else on the webinar knows Alice, but again, you were rewarded for being a pest and like staying on top of things and being persistent. If I had $1 for every time a recruiter or a networking contact said, you just have to be patient, Debra, right? Because it just takes a lot longer. Your timing is not their timing, particularly for board roles, even for advisory roles or certain consulting assignments, right? So that I wholeheartedly agree. The other is not a clear spec for board roles and shifting specs. I just had an experience where I was a front runner for an opportunity, and then they just decided what they really need is help with fundraising. So they're going with a banker profile, not a commercial leader profile. And it could change in progress, right? Because their needs evolve over time. So different kinds of specs for candidates, I think, crop up.
And can I tell you, recruiters are telling me that that's happening a lot more with impending, threat of recession. Mm-hmm. Companies are really kind of freaking out a little bit about what's their strategy, what do they need differently, and so they're not being very focused. So that's interesting. Now, I will say that there is a component of recruiters will tell you follow up. Right? Because one of the things that they also will tell you is we get people for boards. We don't get boards for people. So if you think they have a lot of time in their calendar to get to know you, they really don't. They're really thinking, sure, it's nice to have a cadre, a list of great candidates, but really they're focused on getting the next assignment and then getting the people for that assignment. But a lot of them will say to me, hey, look, follow up. And I will say, what is the right cadence? Because I don't want to be a pest. And one of the big 5, if you don't know, there are 5 big recruiting agencies. The way to remember them, I recently learned, is SHREK. So that's the acronym for Spencer Stewart, Hydra Kid Struggles, Russell Reynolds, Egon Zehnder, and Korn Ferry. So that's how I remember the big 5. They're the ones you really want to get on the radar, but there are lots of mid-size that are also fabulous. But one of them actually admitted to me that they put in your file if you're a pest. They have a word for it. Like it's so I said, well, tell me, like, what's the middle ground? How do you follow up and stay top of mind, knowing it's a very top of mind game? Like, who have they talked to lately? But don't be a pest. And most of them have said every quarter, send me a quick note. I might not even follow up, but I will read it and it will remind me of you. So that's having asked a lot of people, that's the tactical, like every quarter, just send them a quick note. By the way, if you're not, I'm probably knowing also Procter quality of being really analytical and organized, but if you don't have your spreadsheet of every contact, and including like the notes on what you last talked about and when you're next going to get together, I would strongly do that. I started out not doing that. I don't know why. I thought I could keep it in my head or something, and it quickly got beyond my control. So now I have to be very disciplined in keeping that and reminding myself, when is the next time I'm going to drop them a note about something? And I reference what we talked about last time as a little tickler, like to help trigger for them who I was, because they talked to a whole lot of hopeful candidates.
No, thank you, Beth. So I'm seeing questions pile up in the Q&A, and Ellen, I'm going to ask for your help in starting to field us questions from the participants.
Absolutely. Hopefully you can hear me.
Perfect.
Yeah, this is Ellen Yobst, and I've been monitoring the questions. And there are a lot of questions about corporate board positions. So I am going to start with those. One question is, how important is your last corporate title on getting a corporate board? And if you were not a C-level person, is there something you can do to help your resume to make you attractive in finding a board position?
So Beth, do you want to lead with a response there?
Sure. I mean, I do think your most recent title is quite important. But maybe there's a situation where the title before it was important, and then you had some sort of transition to some broadening situation. They needed your skill set somewhere else. I'd be able to tell that story. If you think there was a prior title that was the one that people should really focus on, then I would think about how to anchor your story around that and then explain why you did something else, particularly if it looks like it might have been a downgrade. You can, you can have a story which hopefully is rooted in truth, that about how they took your great skill sets in A, B, and C, and the company needed you, and you sort of selflessly went and did it. So I would say it's important. And what can you do if you don't? I mean, I don't know that you need a C-level title. There's loads of different types of boards. Okay, so I talked about public as an example. I do want to make a point. There are so many more opportunities in private. There are so many private equity-backed programs or opportunities. There's a great organization called PDA, Private Directors Association, which I think you should look into. I believe you don't have to be on a board to join that. Some of the organizations you do, and they have opportunities, but most of them don't require C-suite experience as far as I've seen. So, just think of it as a wide range of boards and try to get advice and test kind of where your best target is based on your experience, is what I would suggest.
And
what do you think, Debra?
Yeah, I agree with that. From my exposure, disagree with me if I'm off base, for big company boards, like to get on the board of Procter Gamble or Johnson & Johnson, you would have had to be a sitting C-level person at a Fortune 50 company. But as you expand your fold of different size public companies, private companies, not-for-profits, there are many different types of opportunities. So it's less about and what relevant experience you bring. A lot of boards now are looking for women, or looking for marketers, or looking for diverse candidates, or looking for specialized skill sets like digital, right? As many embark on digital transformation. So I would say cast a wide net and then figure out where your unique value prop and skill set could plug in, given what's needed at that point in time.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, Debra. And additionally, what recruiters have told me in terms of, there are waves, right? So for a while it was women, then there was a real focus on people of color, which is still going on because we know that boards are not nearly as diverse on either of those factors as they need to be. There was a big push for specialized talent. So this cybersecurity person, gosh, there were so many digital specs, I need a deep digital expert. Sometimes boards don't think, I think honestly, about what they need on their board and what they need good consultants and what they need to hire into the company.
Now, that's actually a good frame too, Beth, to separate the three.
Right. And so do you really need a deep digital expert on the board, or do you need leaders who can ask the right questions of the expertise? Because it all changes so fast. So is that board member going to be up to speed? So I think that, so there was a big push for deep subject matter expertise, particularly in the area of digital and cybersecurity, now a little bit more in ESG because of some SEC changes. But then I've heard there's pushback toward CEOs and CFOs. So those are the mega trends, and they probably have to do more with the larger public companies. But then, as Debra said, there's so many other options, and it just is a matter. I mean, if you really want to, you can reverse engineer a little bit, and you can go into, if they're public, you can go into their SEC documents, and every company will talk about what the criteria, what they look for in board members. And then there's a matrix of who has what skill sets, and you can see how old people are and who's probably retiring. And you can kind of get a sense for what companies may be looking for in the future. It's also hard though, because you don't know where their strategy is headed and what might change. But, I would be really optimistic about, it's much more about, as Debra said, finding the right match and being creative in how you find that. And don't get so, most people don't qualify to be on the Fortune 50 boards, right? You have to be a real unicorn for that. But there's so many other opportunities to leverage your skill set and experience.
Absolutely. So Ellen, I'm going to have you field us another question. I wonder if we want to diversify beyond board for some of the other questions, just to ensure we're serving the audience broadly.
Yes, there was a question about the coaching certification and how you felt about that, and why did you choose to do coaching on your own versus joining a company that specializes in coaching?
Okay, on the coaching certification, I learned a lot, and I do think it's important for clients to see that you have the certification, particularly corporate clients. Not all of them, but I do think that's important. And so the certification, as I said, was 2 parts through a accredited organization, which I chose, the Hudson Institute of Coaching, which I thought was phenomenal. Happy to talk about offline with anybody. And then I did the ICF certification. I am not coaching on my own as much. I do have some private, what I call private clients, but clients that I work with independently. But I actually am choosing to affiliate with a few organizations that are coaching experts, and that you become a 1099 employee and you really focus on the coaching, and they do the business development, and which you have an opportunity to help with, but you don't have to. And they do a lot of the administration. So I feel like that I really want to coach, and I don't really want to spend a whole lot of time on the other areas of the back office or the business development. And so I actually am not ready to announce yet, but have been aligning and signing contracts with a few organizations. Having said that, I also do, I have a number of clients that I work with one-on-one, just independently, and I enjoy that too.
So Ellen, what else should we respond to? We probably have it for 5 minutes or so.
Sure. Here's a quick fun one. What does your business card say?
Do you even have a business card? I actually don't have a new business card. Do you have one?
I do, and it says, I do, because I go to different conferences, which are great places to network. National Association of Corporate Directors, Women Corporate Directors. I go to these things, and I have business cards, even though they're a little old fashioned, but it is kind of a nice thing to be able to say, here it is. In terms of, if you mean, what does it say in terms of title? It says executive coach, consultant, and board member.
So that's interesting. So I wonder too, as I've been out there networking again post-COVID, and everyone seems to be linking on with phones on LinkedIn from what I'm experiencing. So, but I think it's great that your card reflects the portfolio intent, right? Because that's how you've rebranded yourself. So that makes sense.
And I'll say, honestly, I do think it's more on your phone now, but there were a number of opportunities. I went to this national conference of National Association of Corporate Directors, and there were some people like I passed by, we had a quick conversation, but they had to get to the next session, and I gave them a card. Like, it's kind of like a quick way to say, okay, here's my information. I assume they'll probably put it, well, I hope they'll put it in their phone in the next, whenever they get a chance and pitch the card. That's fine. Yeah. But that's what I talked about, is being a board member, a coach, and I do a little bit of consulting, but that's a third area. Yeah.
So another question, kind of a general one. What do you see as your superpower, and how has it helped you with your portfolio career?
Debra, do you want to go first on this
I'll
one?
start.
I love your superpower.
Yeah. So my superpower is definitely networking and connection. And it's deeper, right? Because it's not just about lots of contacts. It's actually about following up and building relationships. And building relationships has helped me in my portfolio career. I haven't even launched my Best Collective, which is my consulting. but I've had a bunch of steady work just from people that know me from my last sort of job in the startup world. And, you know, you did this for Nuvo and we need that kind of work or this kind of help. So building relationships and connections are definitely my superpower. And it's helped me with referrals. It also has helped me with an expanded network of investors, so VCs, bankers, et cetera. And having that network is really important as you work with early and growth stage companies, because the never finished job is always about raising capital. So new relationships have definitely helped me get new footing and some steady work inbound to start.
Yeah, and I'm in awe of Debra's networking, just talking to her. And she'll say, oh, you remember so-and-so who worked on such and such, and then they did this. And I'm like, no, I don't remember any of that. But no, I haven't been in touch, although they were really nice people. So she's amazing at that. I'd give her A triple plus on networking, a lot to learn there. It's not flashy, but I think it's creative problem solving was always my skill set of, when you run into a wall, where's the window, where's the door, get a ladder. And so it's been helpful in my portfolio career because, as I said, there's a lot of bumps. It's slow. It's helpful to me in my coaching too, because I help other people think about like my probably like many of you, my ingoing perspective is there's always a way. I mean, there's virtually nothing that's impossible. You just have to think it through from different angles. And I think that's very helpful when you're trying to get creative and put together a next chapter.
No, that's great. Ellen, before I segue to some of the PSAs, are there any last burning questions you want us to field?
Well, one is more of a comment, and it's just given the topic and the interest of people being on board roles, just a reminder that the Procter Gamble Alumni Network, the Alumni Foundation, and the Women's Leadership Forum have great roles for people to participate if they're interested, and they can always ask through the network or run for a board position on the alumni network if they're interested in the nonprofit world and to get experience and expand their network. So anyone who's interested, please reach out.
No, that's great. And that's a great segue to pull back up my screen. Could everyone see my screen?
Yes.
So where is it now? Trying to advance and it's not. Okay, there we go. So I want to just share some more texture around the P&G alumni network and ways to get involved. So building off of Ellen's comment. So first, if you're not a member of the Women's Leadership Forum, I want to invite you to engage and get involved. So we're a community of high impact women who hail from all different parts of P&G, every function, every corner of the world. We're forced to empower women, promote equality, lift women up. We give and gain through different enrichment programs like this. And if you want to just take a picture of the screen, you could see the website and different links on how to join us in our mission. I will tell you, for me, this has been a very fulfilling and rewarding part of my network, just in terms of establishing new connections and gaining a broader perspective as I embarked on this portfolio career. The second is our coaching network. And this actually was a program spearheaded and piloted by P&G alumni women, but has now been adopted broadly by the network. And there's a very senior and seasoned bench of world-class certified coaches from different functions, geographically dispersed. They do offer free consultations, and I believe they offer discounts for alums. So here's the contact information for the coaching network. And we actually just connected Beth to the coaching network. So maybe we'll see another face on this composite next time we share this slide. And then the last opportunity is the foundation, which is really our planned giving from the network. There's been over $2.8 million raised to date, $1.6 million in grants awarded. And this is really about economic empowerment of women or those underserved. This is a really dynamic group. Debbie Kilty, who's a former boss of mine, and Sarah Woods, a former colleague, are leading this endeavor. If you're interested in giving or helping raise and or support this cause, another great way to get involved. So I want to just thank everyone for tuning in today. My understanding is that we've recorded the webinar and we will find ways to share it out. We also welcome your feedback. I don't think we have an official survey, but if there's feedback you can give us on how to be better, how to be more relevant, other topics you'd like to hear, please send those in to us. You have all of our names and LinkedIn's or through the alumni website. Thank you, Beth. It's been an absolute pleasure to reconnect with you in this capacity. Love your insights, inspired by your insights. Look forward to staying in touch. And thanks, Lou and Ellen, for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you. It's a total pleasure. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Have a great day. Bye, everyone.
Bye.